We begin tonight with protesters in the state of Colorado and across the nation making their voices heard today. Communities are holding anti-Trump rallies being labeled as No Kings protests. We've already seen large crowds fill the Colorado state capitol. It was a similar story out in Arvada. Dozens of protesters gathered there today. The protests are being organized by the 50-51 movement. It stands for 50 states, 50 protests, one movement. The organization says the goal is to support democracy and protest against what they say are authoritarian actions of the Trump administration. Those protests reaching many communities across Colorado. Here's what it looked like in Longmont this afternoon. According to the 50-51 movement's website, the core principle behind the events is a commitment to nonviolence. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Evan Krugel. These protests coincide with a military parade happening in Washington, D.C. today to commemorate the Army's 250th anniversary. President Donald Trump also attended the parade while celebrating his 79th birthday. We have protests happening across the state. Jeremy Hohola has been talking with protesters in several smaller Colorado communities. But we start with Ria Jha, who's live in Denver. Ria, how did things look out there today?
Yeah, we've been here the entire afternoon, and while there's a significant crowd right now, the entire area in front of Civic Center Park and up the Capitol steps was filled with people. Now, national headlines, there were a lot of concerns about security and violence, but the protests here in Denver looked much different than that. We were seeing, it was one of the more calmer and peaceful protests that I've ever seen. There were a lot of homemade signs, costumes, and people sprawled over the grass, sharing water and sitting in the shade. Protesters I spoke with said they weren't expecting violence and they weren't going to let the fear keep them from exercising their First Amendment rights. People we spoke with showed up for solidarity, to stand up for migrants in this country, and to show a general disapproval over how President Trump is running this country.
It's impossible to remain silent. Silence means you agree with what's going on.
Denver's a peaceful city. There's no violence here today. There won't be unless, some nut kicks it off or the police attack protesters.
You have to remember that it was over 90 degrees here today. The sun was shining, so it's not surprising that people were kind of just laying out, hanging out at the park here. I know that there are groups of people marching throughout the city, but other than that, it's pretty tame here, but we will continue to monitor that situation as it goes forward. Reporting live at the Capitol, Ria Jha, 9 News.
Yeah, quite a crowd out there today. Thank you, Ria. It is not just major cities seeing these protests. Many smaller communities have been rallying for the same cause. Our Jeremy Hohola continues our team coverage from Golden. Jeremy, you logged a lot of miles today. What have protesters been telling you?
Yeah, that's right, Evan. Outside of Denver, like here in Golden, the crowds have been coming out, especially in areas that are considered conservative. We put a lot of miles on our news unit today. First in Parker, crowds gathered along several intersections there. Town police originally told the organizers in Parker not to protest because officers would be too busy with the Parker Days Festival on Main Street. The No Kings organizers decided to move forward with their protests anyway and avoided the festival on Main Street. We then rolled up to Centennial, to the corner of Dry Creek Road and University Boulevard. We saw crowds gathering at this intersection, lining up and sharing their views about President Trump's policies. The crowds here chanted slogans, waved American flags, and held signs that said the word No Kings. And then in the heart of Littleton, we saw crowds with the same message. Here people gathered along Santa Fe Drive as people drove by honking in support. The heat definitely not stopping people from standing in the direct sun. Here's some of the people we heard from today.
There's a lot of vocal people that are Trump supporters here in Douglas County, especially in Parker. I've lived here for probably 25 years, maybe more. And we don't all support him. We don't support what he's doing.
I don't like what Trump is doing to our country. We need to show that we have a voice.
I don't want to see someone who's declared himself king sort of ruining our country and taking it back 250 years.
I'm just appalled at what Trump is trying to do to our country. He's trying to take health care away from poor people who need it.
And so far here in Golden, the crowds have certainly dissipated. This protest was scheduled from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, so lots of people leaving the area right now. But we haven't heard of any conflicts, any incidents of violence at any of the places that we visited today. Very peaceful protest so far today. Evan, back to you.
Jeremy Hohola covering the entire metro area for us today. Thank you, Jeremy. Almost every corner of the country participated in protests today. This is what it looked like from Los Angeles to Atlanta, Chicago, and Philadelphia. The rallies were organized in nearly 2,000 locations. At the center of the protests are the recent ICE raids and immigration policies from the Trump administration. These protests follow the recent unrest in Los Angeles over federal immigration raids and President Trump's deployment of the National Guard and Marines. The demonstrations come on the Army's 250th anniversary, and it also happens to fall on Trump's 79th birthday. A parade is now underway in Washington, D.C., celebrating the American military. Ahead of that parade, protesters with Refuse Fascism marched across Washington, D.C.
Whether this administration continues unchecked is up to we, the people. Nobody can afford to sit this out.